What is up, guys? So this is going to be my review slash breakdown of The Flash Season 6, Episode 14, titled Death of the Speed Force, which is an episode that came out over a week ago. I mean, the next episode, after Episode 15, is going to come out like a couple hours probably after I upload this video. The reason I'm late on this, and the reason I haven't uploaded in a couple weeks, is because I've had a cold, and it's nothing corona-related, it's just a regular cold, and I haven't really been able to record. Plus, I haven't really been motivated for the most part. However, I am back for this episode, even though again it is like a week late. But anyway, in this video I'll be breaking things down, talking about like things that are new, maybe post-crisis changes, plus Easter eggs to the comics, which there's already something from the title alone, which The Death of the Speed Force is the title of a couple issue long storyline in the comics, which is very, very new and very recent. Something that Season 6 is kind of, it's like a trend, like Bloodwork and Black Hole, and now this episode. A lot of things are very, very new that they're using from the comics, but The Death of the Speed Force was a storyline where after a while of these other forces, other than the Speed Force being introduced, namely the Sage Force, the Strength Force, and the Still Force, those forces, their avatars, those avatars existing were like killing the Speed Force, so the Speed Force sent the Black Flash to kill the avatars of those forces, which Barry had to stop the Black Flash. In the end, Black Flash managed to kill the Sage Force avatar, and in the end, the Speed Force was fine. Now, this storyline is obviously taking something from that, which is the Speed Force is dying, and that title, but it's got nothing to do with that storyline whatsoever. I think it's possible they're going to introduce the other forces in the future, but as of right now, it's something completely different. Plus, it's kind of disappointing, but Black Flash did not appear in this episode whatsoever. That's already one big connection to the comics, but this episode does have a number of different ones, again, right off the bat, with the return of Kid Flash. So, in this episode, Wally returned, and what we were promised were a couple things. One of them is that I'm fairly certain they said that he'd be getting a new name, since Kid Flash doesn't really fit like this 25-year-old anymore. That never happened, but things that did happen is that he came back more mature, and also he has new powers that we've never seen before. The first one is that he could duplicate his body, similar to Speed Mirage's, and also similar to what Reverse Flash did at the end of Season 5, but it is kind of a new thing, since it seems like it's Speed Force energy duplications, not really actual duplications, and not just mirages like the Speed Mirages, so it's something completely new that no other speedster, at least from what we've seen, has ever done before. And Wally's able to do this because of his connection to the Speed Force, or his spiritual connection to the Speed Force, that it doesn't seem like any speedster has really gotten to before. And another one is this manipulation of electricity, something that obviously all speedsters can throw electricity, but no other speedster from what we've seen so far can manipulate it in such a way that it looks like a certain shape, which I don't really know how that would help in a fight ever, other than like maybe distracting somebody or something, but it is something that he does that Barry and no other speedster has ever been able to do from what we've seen. Now, obviously, those are not comic references, because I mean, I guess you could say those are comic references if those are powers that exist in the comics that we've never seen before, but I don't want to mention them because they are changes and something new that we got from this. But there is one big comic reference from Kid Flash's return, and that's a reference to when the original Kid Flash, Wally West, returned after 5 years of being completely absent and also basically non-existing. In this episode, right after Kid Flash returns and helps save the people from the helicopter, he reunites with Barry, and they hug, and it's clear that this is a visual reference to DC Rebirth, where Kid Flash did return, and the Flash and Kid Flash shared this hug after, like I said, Wally West was gone from continuity for 5 full years. He didn't exist whatsoever, as he was replaced by this New 52 version of the character, which in the end, it turns out they're not actually the same character, they're cousins. That was something that they retconned in, but this is a clear visual reference to that. Another thing that's very recent is like from 2016, very, very recent, that they're doing on the show, which again, like I said, is a recurring theme, but I think it's a really cool shot, and I really do like that visual reference. So another comic book reference from Kid Flash has to do with the fact that he mentions that he uses the Speed Force to like look at future possibilities, and one of them is that he mentioned his future children. Now this is just really a throwaway line, as he mentions his future children, Barry's future children. He just mentions the future generations that take over the speedster mantles. However, in the comics, the original version of Wally West does have children, Jay and Iris West, who are also twins, who do exist in the comics and actually were brought back very, very recently to continuity, like a month ago or something like that. So while this is technically based off the New 52 version of Wally, this might be a reference to the children of the pre-New 52 version of Wally, Iris and Jay West. So in this episode, Cisco returns from his Doppelganger expedition, his Earth Prime research task, and he mentions that he visited Atlantis. Another reason this is significant is obviously, one, because Atlantis is a very, very huge, big location in the DC universe. It's where Aquaman is from. However, the reason this is big for Earth Prime is because on Earth 1, Atlantis either didn't exist or it was underwater and we didn't know about it. However, on Earth 2, it did exist. This further cements the fact that Earth 2 was one of the universes that combined into Earth Prime, but it also means that Atlantis is not only a known location on Earth Prime, but it's potentially above water, which I'm not a fan of that, because this is supposed to be like a final version of this version of the DC universe, and Atlantis is an underwater location. It's where Aquaman is from, or the Atlanteans are from. If it's above water, then they would not have powers, so Aquaman could not have powers. He would not exist. So they did kind of hint that it is above water, because Cisco went there and it was above water in Earth 2. But I'm hoping that that's something that's a retcon, because I don't like the fact that Atlantis is above water, because that means that Aquaman, he can't really exist in this finalized version of a DC universe. So there is one post-crisis thing to mention from this episode, and it has to do with there's a multiple, the whole episode is basically because of the crisis, but there is one thing that I want to mention before I get to the death of the Speed Force parts, and that has to do with these other doppelgangers, the ones that survived to Earth Prime. As Cisco mentions that if they were to have been brought to Earth Prime, they would have died by now because of cellular degeneration, which is actually in line with Batwoman and not in line with what Supergirl has shown us, which I thought that, Supergirl did this first. They brought characters like this first, so I thought it was Batwoman that was doing something wrong with the cellular degeneration, but now Flash is coming along and saying that it's like Batwoman, which basically makes it 2-to-1, making it that Supergirl is the show that's doing it wrong, because those doppelgangers over there are not being affected whatsoever by cellular degeneration whatsoever, which is basically a huge plot hole in the entire universe. Because why are those doppelgangers not being affected by that, but all the ones from Gotham City and I guess now Central City are? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So that's something I guess wrong with Supergirl, which is now true because of the Flash. So then we get to the death of the Speed Force, and the answer for why it is dying. It was hinted at that it might be because of the Bloodwork storyline, because Barry betrayed the Speed Force of sorts, which did turn out to be like he was trying to trick Bloodwork, but still, he did betray the Speed Force, and he did kill that version of Nora Allen in the same way that Thawne did to the real version of Nora Allen, but it's clear by the end that it has nothing to do with the Bloodwork storyline. Instead, it has something to do with something that happened right after the Bloodwork storyline, Crisis on Infinite Earths, as it was explained that because the Spectre, Oliver Queen, he gave Barry extra power, or he unlocked his full potential. His energy, the Spectre's energy, started infecting the Speed Force, and it started to slowly kill it. So in the end, because of what happened in the Crisis, Oliver Queen basically destroyed the Speed Force, but at the same time, I don't really think that he was able to control that. There's nothing else he could have done. But I just think it's crazy to think about that. Looking at what Arrow was as a TV show, the main character of that show who's been powerless the entire time, except for a little bit in season 4, in the end, he basically destroyed the Speed Force just by touching somebody on his forehead. It's pretty insane, but that is where we were at during Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it's kind of where we are at right now, as the Speed Force is dying, and it seems like there's nothing they could do about it other than create this new Speed Force that maybe there's going to be some repercussions for that. Maybe Barry will have to start all over again in terms of rediscovering his speed. That is something that might be happening, but as of right now, that's really all we know. So something that happened in this episode and the last episode is that Thawne returned. However, this episode basically 100% confirms that Thawne is indeed back. I will say that the scene where Cisco realizes that it's not Nash, it's Thawne, is probably my favorite moment of the entire episode because of how intense it is. So I really like that. But the reason I'm mentioning it here as in the Easter egg portion is because they kind of try to explain here at least why he looks like Harrison Wells. Because one thing that always bothered me after The Flash Season 1 ended is the fact that Eobard looks like Harrison Wells ever during Crisis on Earth X during The Flash Season 5. It defies all logic, and it makes no sense that he looks like Harrison Wells, and the reasons that they came up with, it's stupid, and it doesn't make any sense to me. The reason they made him look like that is not, it didn't make him look like that, it's just that they brought back Tom Cavanaugh because he's always been around, he's always been a series regular, and getting back Matt Letcher, who I'm pretty sure is on another show, is not anywhere as easy. So while they do want to bring a reverse flashback, they need to use Tom Cavanaugh, and while that I think has worked a lot of the time, it really bothers me that he looks like Harrison Wells, which makes no sense. So here it seems like they maybe are coming up with some sort of solution to that, as he possesses Nash's body. I don't know if this will stick forever, but at least in this and every other episode he appears in going forward, he is in Nash's body. It makes sense that he looks like Harrison Wells and is played by Tom Cavanaugh. So in terms of my review for this episode, I definitely was disappointed. I honestly thought this could be like the best episode of the season, like the Enter Flash time of the season, an episode where a speedster has been gone for a while, returns, it focuses on the Speed Force. I think it would have been really, really cool, or it could have been. However, because of how different it was from the comic book storyline, I don't think it was anywhere near as cool. Plus, there are a lot of things in this episode that I really either don't like or I'm not a huge fan of. Like, I think the scenes with Iris and Eva are they're so boring and derivative at this point that I don't care until something new happens. Now, something new does happen with Camilla's kidnapping at the end, but until then, nothing really, in my opinion, of interest happens whatsoever in that storyline. However, I would say that the main reason this episode is nowhere near as good as I would have hoped is because of the villain Turtle 2, who is she's terrible. She's an absolutely terrible villain, so that's something that really bogs down this episode quite a bit. The villain Turtle 2 is really, really bad. However, I think Wally's return is exciting. His new powers are really, really cool, and I think the death of the Speed Force storyline overall, while not as exciting as I would have hoped, is definitely still a very, very good and relatively exciting storyline. Like I said, the scene with Cisco and Thawne was really, really intense. Definitely, or not definitely, but probably my favorite moment of the episode. And while I didn't like the storyline with Eva and Iris and even Camilla, I think that the ending is interesting enough because of the possibilities it opens up, like potentially every single member of Team Flash being kidnapped until Barry is the only one left and everyone around him are fakes, they're mirror copies. I think that could be really, really interesting. However, overall, definitely not as good an episode as I would have hoped, and I'd give it an 8.7 out of 10. So anyway, let me know your thoughts about this episode in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for what is probably going to be my next video, my review for the episode 15 of Season 6 of The Flash, which the video will come out tomorrow. But as always, thanks for watching.